Okay, everybody, so your kind of developmental question for this week is an 8-mark question which reads, in what ways were lives of Christians affected by the Nazi social policies? Now, this is a very similar question to the one you had last week, which looked at how the lives of women were affected by Nazi social policies, in the sense that you need to write 2 peel paragraphs. You need to be able to provide 2 distinct and separate ways that people were affected, and you need to provide precise evidence in support of that. So there's different ways that you can divide this question up into 2 separate reasons. One way is to divide it up according to the denominations. So Catholics were affected in this way, Protestants were affected in that way. Or you can look at it in a way of conformists and non-conformists. And what I mean by that is those who were willing to conform or agree with the Nazi regime on the one hand, and those that were not willing to agree to the Nazi regime on the other hand. So I'll deal with the 2 denominations first. When you're looking at the Catholics, at first, things did not change because of the Concordat, which meant that Hitler agreed not to interfere in the Catholic Church's business. However, he soon broke that promise, and so the lives of Catholics were affected. For example, he started to harass priests and bishops by saying that they were more loyal to the Pope than they were to him as Führer, and those that objected were sent to concentration camps as political opponents. For ordinary people that attended Catholic Church, things like Catholic youth groups were closed. So, for example, me, I was raised as a Catholic, and it might surprise you all that when I was in my primary school years, I actually attended Sunday school. So I actually went to sort of like a youth group on a Sunday afternoon and attended, where I learnt about the Bible and messages to do with Christianity, but I also learnt a lot about ethics and how to treat others. So for those youth groups, they were all closed, and instead the members were expected to join the Hitler Youth or its kind of younger groups as well. So in that sense, it would affect younger Catholics, and for the parents, it would affect them in the sense that they would have to change their teachings and the ways that they brought up their children, so that the morals and the ethics were in accordance with the Nazi regime. Otherwise, they were going to get accused of not being loyal. For the Protestants, on the other hand, you can talk about how they were obliged to join the Reich Church, where they were considered German Christians, and they would sometimes turn up in Nazi uniform to church in order to show their allegiance to the Nazi party. You would have swastikas within church, you would have Mein Kampf there, you would have, like, I don't know, a great big picture of Hitler, some of the iconography, some of the paintings that were made of Hitler tried to make him out to be some kind of Christ-like figure. So that would have had a huge impact on the sort of services that the people attended. And again, it goes back to their moral values and being asked to conform to these new values of the Nazi ideology. Just to give you an idea, this is something from the oath of members of the Reich Church used to say, which is the swastika on our chests and the cross in our hearts. The cross being the crucifixion of Jesus, and obviously the swastika being the logo of a Nazi party. So it's this idea that they blended the two, Nazi ideologies with Christianity, and that would have affected the way that those Christians would have behaved, because if they believed it, if they kind of bought into the ideas of the Reich Church, then that would have meant that they would have conformed to Nazi beliefs and, you know, not been a threat to the Nazi Party. The other way you can look at it, of course, is conformists or non-conformists. Now, I've talked about conformists just now, you know, those that chose to join the Reich Church, wear a Nazi uniform, you know, and agree to the ideologies of the Nazi Party. For non-conformists, obviously, it was, you know, a huge risk to not conform to Nazi beliefs. It would have meant that they would have not been able to attend church, or they would have joined a confessional church, which in some ways was like an underground church. You know, it wasn't official. It was, you know, attending that church would have been a kind of a protest in itself, and that would have carried a lot of risk for those people that chose to do that. The other group you could talk about are pacifists. So a number of Christians are also pacifists. The idea being that a lot of Jesus's teachings suggests that he himself was a pacifist, you know, going back to that blessed are the peacemakers. So many Christians were pacifists. And for example, the Salvation Army, which were a Christian group active in Germany at the time, they fled. They had to go into exile because they couldn't practice their pacifist beliefs within the Nazi regime. So yeah, that's just a breakdown of different ways that you could approach the question. Please use the writing frame that I've provided to plan out your answer, and then, you know, if you're feeling confident enough, have a go without the writing frame. But the most important thing is that you provide two distinct reasons, clear evidence, okay, so you'll need to look at your KO or Seneca to find that clear evidence, and then linking back to the question of how it affected people's lives, you know, and Christianity, going back to what I said at the very beginning of the first video, in the 1930s was a big part of most people's lives. You know, they were practicing Christians. It's not like modern day Britain today, where a lot of people will say they're Christian, but they haven't been to church in 6 months to a year. You know, these are people that regularly attended churches and regularly got their sort of moral compass from the church. And it would have entirely changed because of the fact that they now had to wrestle with the Nazi ideology on the one hand and Christian teachings on the other.